Trouble in Havana. Other American imperialists looked south to the Caribbean and Latin America as a playground for their dreams of conquest. Their opportunity would come soon enough. In 1898, the same year President McKinley annexed Hawaii, America got wrapped up in a conflict in Cuba that would lead to the conquest of several more territories. Ever since the age of exploration, the islands of the Caribbean had been under the control of European colonial powers, especially Spain. Cuba, the biggest island in the Caribbean, sat only 90 miles south of Florida. Many Americans believed Cuba was a very natural target for American expansion. Cuba was under the control of Spain, but in 1895, ordinary Cubans began to rise up and demand independence from Spain. Things began to get violent, and this worried Americans. Like Hawaii, Cuba was home to many wealthy American planters who were in the sugar business. They feared the disorder and violence of a Cuban revolt. Many began to speak of joining Cuba to the United States the way Hawaii had been annexed. In 1898, President McKinley sent the warship USS Maine to Havana, Cuba, to keep an eye on the situation and protect American interests. The Maine would come to play a pivotal role in events to come. All was quiet in the Havana harbor. The bay water was calm and the air hung still in the moonless night. The tiny lights of little fishing vessels shone out across the bay like little stars reflected in the dark waters. Cuba had been plagued by unrest over the past several months, but tonight, Havana was at rest. Docked in the harbor, beyond the score of fishing crafts, was the massive American warship, the USS Maine. The Maine had been sent to Havana to protect Americans in Havana during the Revolution. The Maine was a monster of a vessel, built in the latest fashion. Clad in heavy iron and powered by steam, it featured 2 powerful gun turrets that could turn any direction to pummel enemy ships or cities. On this night, 355 sailors worked upon the Maine. Most of them were sleeping when shortly before 10 p.m., an explosion rocked Havana Harbor. The Cuban fishermen looked on in terror as the eerie orange light of fire illumined the water. The residents of Havana flocked to the wharves to see what had happened. Where moments ago the USS Maine floated peacefully, now there was only a mass of flaming wreckage and columns of black smoke billowing into the night sky. Sailors' screams could be heard both upon the remains of the ship and in the water. Some of the fishing vessels tentatively drifted in toward the wreckage, sometimes pulling up a survivor, sometimes finding nothing but floating bodies amid the debris. Rescue efforts continued throughout the night. As the sun began to creep up the following morning, it became clear how extensive the damage was. The bottom had been completely ripped out of the Maine, leaving only twisted parts of the warship's body protruding above the water. Survivors, soaked and in shock, were brought ashore into buildings hastily converted into field hospitals. Meanwhile, dead bodies were dragged out of the water covered in ash and laid in rows upon the wharf. Out on the bay, 2 fishermen, Juan and Carlos, continued to search for survivors, but hope was running out. As they navigated through the debris littering the bay, the 2 simple fishermen were astounded by the strength of the blast that destroyed the Maine.
"Carlos, what do you think could have done this?"
asked Juan.
"Do you think the ammunition exploded?"
Carlos looked at the wreckage and the broken, charred hull of the ship. Up ahead, The gray forms of several more floating bodies came into view. He shook his head.
Maybe not. It could have been a Spanish mine, an underwater explosive device.
Juan nodded.
Either way, I think the Spanish are going to pay for this.
"260 American sailors lost their lives in the Maine disaster. And Juan was correct. Spain would pay.